Thank you. Wait a minute, we're gonna do this again. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, that's the grandson of a Baptist preacher. Got to get that call and response. I have the honor today of just kind of facilitating a conversation around diversity and inclusion and advancing equity and diversity in the workplace, particularly as it relates to manufacturing. And I'm really, really excited because these two individuals, they're millennials, right? Yeah, you kind of are. So she won't claim it, but she's in there. I'm a baby boomer, so I'm going to talk about that. But the most important thing is both of these are leaders in the manufacturing industry, and they see it from a number of different perspectives, but the one that I'm asking them to look from as entrepreneurs, as minority entrepreneurs in manufacturing. And so I want to do a brief introduction. Andrew Sherman is the current CEO and co-founder of American Bully, which started in 2017. He previously worked at DLH Bowles as a project support engineer. Andrew Sherman is a proud graduate of CCBC Catonsville. That's Community College of Baltimore County. For anybody that didn't catch that, I'm a big fan of Baltimore County. That's why I got my little Baltimore County pin, so that's our connection, Andrew. American Bully Manufacturing is a full-service product development company offering turnkey solutions to bring products to market. From engineering design services to prototyping and small-run manufacturing, American Bully can bring an idea to life. I like that. April Richardson, this is a young lady I know really, really well. She is a member of the program that I manage, which is the Minority Business Development Agency's Advanced Manufacturing Center. It's a mouthful here in Baltimore. It's a federally funded program, and it focuses on developing minority manufacturers. So I've had the pleasure of working with April, who is not only an attorney, she is a single mom of Donovan, a young man who I've gotten to know. She served both in a federal capacity for FDIC. She served in Prince George's County for which office? State's Attorney's Office. Yep, we got to keep all of this up. But in addition to working full-time with the feds, Ms. Richardson operates her law practice, a private law practice, and she's become an entrepreneur, as I mentioned. She's the president of Food Opportunity LLC, a company that promotes the ownership of manufacturing food companies for women and minority businesses. Under the company, she owns DC Sweet Potato Cake and Baked in Baltimore, a retail manufacturing bakery. I want to start this off by kind of talking about DEI and the backdrop that we're working from. And that backdrop really had a flashpoint in May of 2020, and that was the George Floyd incident. When that occurred, many businesses across the country had these statements that they put out. And one of my former colleagues is now the president and CEO of a billion-dollar company. And his company put out a statement. And I'm just going to paraphrase the statement. As the length and impact of the pandemic has grown, our teams have stayed true to our mission, blah, blah, blah. Now we are facing a new challenge here in the U.S. Racism has no place in our society or our company. We'll name the company, integrity, respect, responsibility, and it goes on. As a company, our steadfast commitment to diversity and inclusion is central to our values and culture and is essential to our performance and responsibility as a public company. In difficult times, it is especially important to communicate, collaborate, and support each other. And it goes on. That was the statement. This is someone I know very well. And I immediately went to the website and I looked at the management team. And that management team did not reflect any of the words in the statement. So, my response, my friend, it's been a while since we've spoken. I read your statement this morning. Leadership does matter, and your statement is important to set tone. I trust that as a leader, your staff, vendors, and stakeholders to subscribe, Mike, to what I call intentional inclusion. We will not root out racism unless we're intentional. Thank you for your statement. Wishing you continued success. Statements, they matter, but action matters more. And so on that backdrop of what happened in 2020 and this move to DEI, I want to talk to Andrew and April about their perspective as minority entrepreneurs, about how those statements made you feel, and what did you see, and what do you see now as the way to get companies to move into a more inclusive environment and workforce of all aspects, from suppliers to employees to leadership. Andrew?
All right.
I'm not, we're gonna save ladies, we're gonna save the lady this time. We're gonna go.
So can everyone hear me? I know Scott's got a good voice, so I want to make sure I don't need April, if you need this later, let me know. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And, Scott, thank you again for the introduction. It's definitely a sore topic. It's something that's still, even to this day, the elephant in the room. However, it's something that is always on everyone's mind of how do I address it appropriately to not offend or seem lost in the conversation and not, go at it the wrong direction. For me, my age, I just turned 30 this year, so I think growing up, there was never the thought of the length of inclusion being an issue. Everyone I grew up with, we had a lot of diversity, so it wasn't until my later age that I started realizing that there is this limit, and then even more recently, as we're seeing on the news and some of these tragic events, there's a lot more at hand that we have to address. So I think when it comes to my personal growing in the workplace, it's definitely something that you see a lot of in the inner city communities that me growing up in the counties wasn't always prevalent. However, it was never ignored. We definitely made sure that both growing up, sports teams, events, communities, it was a focus, and that was something that I learned to include into both the workplace and then of course with my business to ensure that it's a level of requirement that there's a lot that people can learn from both sides. So it's definitely one that's a challenging fate because you do have both sides that look at things differently. Just with anything from age to gender, obviously is a conversation in its own, but it's always been a challenge, and it's one thing that I've made sure, whether I've realized it or not, being a minority, it's always been a focus of mine to group the conversation to the youth to make sure that they know that it's an important feat to what we're looking to do here today.
So April, you had probably a different experience.
Yeah, of course.
And so why don't you share yours?
So first, I am not a millennial. I am 4 years off from 50. I'm the most important generation, which is Generation X. We created these little monsters, so and y'all created us. So I'm not sure who the blame is for what's happening right now. So it always cracks me up whenever we have to have a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It cracks me up. We already know what we need to do, but we pretend like we need to sit in a room again to have the same conversation about what we already know we need to do. What bothers me the most is that when I was working for the feds, I worked for the FDIC and I also worked for Treasury. And my job has always been on the white-collar crimes prosecution side. So we will go around the country shutting down financial institutions. But the one thing that I did, which was separate from some of my colleagues, is that I would read business documents. I would take a look to see how deals were structured. I would take a look to see who was in charge, but then I would also look at the people that we were investigating, high-level bank officials. And the first thing that I would notice is that this is not criminal, they're just dumb. How did they get here? It was through the old boy network. And I remember someone telling me the reason that they got their job is because someone that looked like them vouched for them and put them in that position. And they knew that by putting them in a position that they would control the power, and by them controlling the power, the people that put them into power will be able to receive the benefit from that. That's historical. So we keep talking about diversity. We already know what it means. Have people on your leadership team, not just the janitors, people, that are diverse, but not just diverse in color, but diverse in thought. The number one thing that I hate as a black woman who is minority because I'm 6 feet tall, in case you didn't notice that minority status, is that when companies bring in the black guy, it is not the black guy that thinks for the black people. They just happen to be black in color. We know what inclusion is. It means to include people. We know what equity means. It means, is it really fair? We keep having these conversations as if it is new. But my advice to you all is to not wait for the next black man to be murdered in order to protect the image of your company, because that historically has been done. And then we know 2 years later, we're all back to normal. Everything's like, it'll blow over. We've had several organizations and companies that I know are not companies that I would ever give a dime to would release that same letter. And I had good friends like my friend Mike Galeazzo call me and said, this is incredible. We happen to know that some of these companies will never put certain people on their board, but yet they issued these statements. We're not going to get far until we band together and say enough is enough. But that means that it's going to be hurtful and it's going to be painful. That means that some of you all will lose your jobs by speaking up. But most of us don't want to do that. We want to be comfortable. We want to push it down the road and we want to say it's somebody else's. So from my perspective as an entrepreneur, it doesn't go away as an entrepreneur, because then it's still a matter of me being selected by someone that believes that I am good enough for them to do business with. It's the same thing. So just because I'm an entrepreneur, it doesn't take away that hierarchical effect of being a minority woman who happens to be tall.
I love it. I love that minority status.
It's terrible.
Okay. So you brought up an issue, right, that I think is really important. And I'm trying to mix in some editorial facts. This was from CNBC. Social values aside, there's a real financial risk for companies that fail to put their money where their mouth is. A lack of diversity and background and experience can stifle innovation and promote groupthink, while companies that don't prioritize inclusion may struggle to attract and retain top talent and younger workers. What has been, because now, Andrew, you're dealing in government contracting space.
Yes.
So there is some need for the people that you work with to have some level of diversity in their vendors. But what is your real experience in terms of people coming to you, right? This idea of the financial benefit associated with working with people of diverse backgrounds. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the obvious, you know, there's definitely a lot of set-asides for minorities, small, veteran, but for us, you know, as selfish as it is, there's that level that we can apply our knowledge. So at 4 owners, 51% is minority owned. That just happened to work out in the way for how our team got built. But we make that a purpose to ensure that when we're actually going towards some of these contracts, you know, we make it known that we are minority owned, we are diverse in our own build, but even more so that our vendors and our suppliers are both in support for the same mission that we are. Kind of like April said, is, you know, we don't want to work with anyone who would either judge by color or what they stand for, or don't put their money where their mouth is, because it just is important to us to make sure that this is an equal state for business that, you know, again, the government does put a lot of set-asides, and again, we're appreciative of that, but we definitely make sure that our work outproves the fact that we're just a minority business, that we are smart, bright, we're working with the inner city students to ensure that you know, we can find that hidden talent that maybe some other bigger corporations haven't put that time in to find. So, you know, we try and do our best where we can, and make the right decisions with what we're given.
So stay there, Andrew, real quick, because there's something that we call the multiplier effect, right? And that multiplier effect in manufacturing, of course, are the individuals that we touch outside of the company. And you kind of mentioned that when you talked about working with youth. The other issue that we have in manufacturing is we don't have youth who are interested in coming into manufacturing. So what has been your experience in working with youth and your success rate, if you would?
Definitely. So when we first started our company, I made it a priority to reach out and collaborate with the industry. And within the first year, what I found is, just very brief, is there's not a lot of minorities in the industry, both starting all the way up from leadership all the way down to just your basic technician laborist. A lot of janitorial, whether that's part-time, contracted in, that just happened to be the circumstances. So even more importantly to us as a growing business, and I'm sure some of you guys heard from the earlier conversations, as far as work retain, getting a new the appropriate candidates for the jobs. We made it a purpose that we're already services and programs in place within the cities that were pushing this envelope, but they were kind of left behind. It wasn't really, truthfully, in my position, we just actually, high school in inner city in Baltimore, the board was run by majority white-owned businesses. And when you put them all in a room with a majority black education classroom, they're not looking up to them as inspirational or make me want to step out of my comfort zone to do this. So I befriended one of the leaders of that group and asked, hey, would love to see if we can kind of recompass this in a way that could be inspirational. Say, here's a young mixed man that came from, sure, not the worst case standings, but was able to make a name for himself. And I think being that inspiration to say, no matter where you come from, this isn't about white or black, it's just about having the resources and being that inspiration where you can. And that was one thing that both with the network I made and the students that I worked with, sure, selfishly it's helping myself, whether the companies or the networks that we're in with our industries, find that talent, but the talent's there, it's just been overlooked. So that's been part of my mission to work with that level of diversity from the younger standpoint.
Now, Edwin, you have a very diverse staff, and how have you been able to accomplish that? And what are your recommendations for getting people to come to work with you?
It was intentional. I decided that I wanted a diverse staff, so I went after it. That's it. It really is not, it's really not that complicated, and I think that's the thing that we do, is that we complicate this conversation. But also, when you come and work with my company, you know that where you start is not going to be where you finish. We do not bring outsiders in to fill top-level jobs until we have decided that the people that are with us are worth investing in so that they could take the next step up. That's another thing that we fall short on with organizations. We're always trying to bring people out instead of investing in the people that we have here. Hey, the guy that is on the line, because I own a bakery, the froster that is my froster today should be my manager tomorrow, and he should know this. It's not going to be a secret, because he has to know that, number one, he is valued, number two, we see you, but it also gives him accountability to start to work upwards. Because now you have something, because he's tired of working for corporations that bring in someone else from outside and they give his job away that he has really earned. But it's also about the way that we invest in our employees. Like, for example, we opened a new location, a bakery retail on K Street. Do you know how hard it is to recruit employees right now? I'm sure most of you guys know. Out of 135 applications, and after a 2-month search, we were able to get 5 people that would actually show up for work on time, ready to work, without excuses. And I had to figure out, what am I going to do to keep these young people? And the first thing that I said was, you know what I'm gonna start offering for free? Mental health therapy work groups, once a week, once a month. And guess what else we're gonna bring in? We're gonna bring in tax professionals to help them understand their numbers. And guess what else we're gonna bring in, right? Because for me, it's not where the people, when they're walking in, it's not that we're gonna receive them as they are, it's that we are going to build them to where they can be. Because we believe that it is intentional with what we do with our employees. Now, you can look at your boards of directors, you can look at your senior leadership, that's intentional. It's a choice that was made. And the choice that was made discounted the other choices that were there as an option. But it's really simple. We just gotta put all of these fancy words in action. But also, we also look at our vendors, because we buy a lot of food from US Foods, from the Cisco's of the world, and I'll call them up, I'll say, do you have any black sales reps? Oh, I'm not sure. Well, give me the list and I'll figure it out from the names. They know who the black sales reps are. Do you have any women sales reps? Because in food, there are hardly no women in leadership. Do you have any women that are sales food reps at US Foods? Oh, well, we're not sure, but you can call Bob. I don't want to call Bob. Bob's good. I want to talk with Lisa. And I'm very clear about that because I'm not afraid. And I do not let the current conversation of me wanting to expand my diverse footprint be stolen by other people by saying, well, you shouldn't do that. No, I shouldn't have had to suffer through history. And then we wouldn't have to do a course correction so direct and impactful. But the key to diversity, inclusion, and equity is our friends on the other side that don't look like us making a conscious choice to be that voice for us in the room. Hey, what about them? I know John downstairs and janitorial staff, he's been doing a great job. How about we figure out what it is that he wants to do? Because I'm sure he doesn't want to push the room for the rest of his life. How about we build inside? And then we build our way up to ownership. And I'll share this one quick thing. There's a client of mine that I'm working with on the business side. He used to be the executive chef, black guy, for a restaurant on the water at National Harbor. The restaurant sat right at the front of the water. Executive chef. And they told him, it was very clear, you would never become the executive chef over all of our organizations. They were very clear like this. They were bringing people from all over the world to do the job that he's been doing. Oh, he's interim, but he's not good enough to take the full job. So you know what he did? He left his job, and we're negotiating the space that they lost for him to run his own restaurant concept in the very same space where they told him he wasn't good enough. So when we see the job, when we see flight from work, we see people tired of having people to tell them which way and how far and how fast they can run it in order for them to be successful. Minorities are tired of it. Women are tired of it. So we're creating our own. But the problem with creating our own is that we're running into the same issue on the outside. Food Opportunity is my company. We have to compete. And one thing that I did not do is that I never became an MBE until I absolutely had to. I wanted people to see my company as a good-ass cake company and not as a black-ass cake company. And it was only until I could not get a contract from a company that said, we love your products, we want you in stores, but we need you to be an MBE. Why? We're just as good. You want us. Oh, because we have to check off that box. But what I didn't know, Scott, is that when they put me into that category, they only put me into the black category. And it was only one slot for them to choose from the black category, but from the general admission category, they had 30 slots. So now you got me fighting against other people that look like me that should have an opportunity just like me. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if y'all with me. Okay, I got you. Some head nods help.
So, touching on a lot of things there, April.
Yeah, I'll touch you.
One of the things that seems to me that kind of goes across is this idea of company cultures.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Right? And how do you change company cultures? Both of you are engaging with larger corporations, right? April, I know you're engaging Andrew in this space we call contracting, government contracting. April, you're engaging in this space, wholesaler to very large food distribution or food retail companies. Right? How do you manage to engage with them because of their cultures?
Goodness. All business is not good business. And we don't take everything. I try my best to only work with people that like us. How do you know? You can tell how they treat you. You can tell during times of devastation and despair if they're calling on you for assistance or for help. We do business with Starbucks, Safeway, Wegmans, Nordstrom's, and we're on QVC, 5 major organizations. And I did a LinkedIn post because I hate social media, but I did a LinkedIn post when my company took over the entire bakery case for Wegmans. You can't take over a bakery case. Those are slotting, right? Those are slots. But yet my little company, we killed the numbers. And I put up a post, and my post was really simple. It was a picture of me inside of Wegmans, and it said, before diversity, inclusion, and equity was a cool thing, these companies saw fit that my company was good enough to do business with before it became cool to do business with black companies. That garnered over 60,000 views, 60,000 clicks, hundreds of thousands of comments were put on that because that's what we want. We don't want to have to be in the DEI, box. We just want it to be fair. And those companies have always been fair. Now we had to have to deal with companies that were not necessarily fair, but I'm very quick to not say that a company is racist. I'm very quick to say that that company has asshole tendencies. because sometimes that's what the leaders are, assholes, and it's misunderstood as racism. And we don't do business with that, because I would never want my company to be associated with that company that may have the indication that they are racist, even though they're not. The leader is an asshole. Sometimes you have to work around the leaders and then deal with the everyday people that work for the companies. So I found a real cool way of, if I'm dealing with the buyer, we're okay. But if I have to go up top, we're not okay. So sometimes I make sure that when I penetrate companies, I find the people that want us there. And it's not always gonna be leadership, but leadership hardly ever makes those decisions anyway.
So you just kind of described, in your business, there are going to be champions that are going to look toward an April or an Andrew. Andrew, what is your experience with those champions, and how do you find them? And then how would you suggest that companies kind of find those individuals to champion this idea of diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so, again, we're a little bit newer, so I think some of the challenges that April faces versus what I face is more of the ageism side, let's be honest. We definitely have had the examples of vendors who we've worked with that, they've been great, whether it's the buyers or the purchasers, they love the interaction that we have. And normally it's via phone or email, so you don't really know how to really tag a color or an age or anything to that name. So it doesn't really come out until the pressure hits, where you have to really have that sit down Zoom meeting or something to go, hey, something just went wrong here, let's kind of talk, and maybe upper management comes into play. And there's definitely been times where, I don't think I've ever experienced anything from a racial perspective, but I got on the Zoom call with, the 65-year-old CEO of some organization. He goes, okay, interesting, so let's go ahead with today. And I kind of sit back and go, okay, you know what? It's okay, this is new, right? And as far as kind of how to go about that and what to look for, I mean, as April said, there's no other way other than finding the right person that meshes with you and your vision and what you stand for. And there's no reason to do business with someone else that doesn't. I definitely encourage everyone to apply those standards, and I think that has to just come from within and then through the rest of the company. Just like April said, that's something that we just start from the get-go, whether it's empathy, passion, inclusion, diversity. I mean, it's something that with a good leader with the right intentions, hopefully that goes to the rest of the company. So I mean, that's kind of what we look for. We don't tend to fare away from anyone that's, that those first intentions you kind of warm up to, but it's definitely critical to make sure that the people you're working with align with your visions. And it's okay to put out on, you don't need that money, you don't have to go after it for any specific reason, but do what's best for your values.
And I will add this quickly. I am a huge proponent of reminding people that just because someone does not carry my skin color does not mean that they are not speaking up for me, and does not mean that they don't have the best intentions. Because the way that we've gotten the majority of our contracts, the way that we have had sustainability in the market has nothing to do with people that look like me. It's because the people who have the seat at the table spoke up for me. What about her company? We like her company. What about them? They're a great company. You want to get rid of them? Why would you get rid of them? That makes no sense to me. So some of that comes from people who don't look like us. And we got to remember that an all-white board does not necessarily mean an all-bad board, right? But it does send a message to people color-wise. The optics aren't right, but that does not mean that the messaging isn't right.
So what I've heard is leadership matters, intentionality matters, right? Champions matter. Talk to me about what you see in terms of either policy or practices that matter. Things that you've experienced that have been on the policy or practices side that have contributed in your mind to opening up the playing field.
Measurements. From the time a company issues those letters, let's take a look at where they are now. That shows where the practice is. That shows where the action is. Again, I think that overthinking it, you don't need a policy, you need action. Just show us what the percentages are. Show us what the impact is. But as a matter of fact, take a survey within your companies and ask your employees what's happening. And if they're honest, they're gonna tell you how they feel. If they're afraid, it's because you're doing something wrong.
It's a good point. I mean, you see a lot of I know for my generation, you see a lot of the big corporations putting out that statement, we're here for this, for 30 days, we care, we matter, and then 30 days is up. You know, is it really that you care, or is it something that you're just trying to show that inclusion? And I'd be willing to bet if any of these companies actually did what April's saying, some type of internal survey, I would much rather see something of that nature come out and say, hey, here's what our employees think about what we're doing. Here's from the word of the mouth of our team. And I think that speaks more than just putting out a statement. Similar as like, hey, you know, Happy 4th of July, Merry Christmas. Are you actually, not that there are any, but in the sense of I'm just putting this out to show the world that I care, is not the same as actually going to the internal purpose of the team or what you actually stand for and actually say, hey, here's why we do what we do, and we never stop doing that. We don't just do it for a 30-day window or because of a certain event.
Well, they do that because they're afraid of minorities taking away the economics from their companies, because they know how strong our spending power is. That's why you do it. It's just the old, you know, smoke and mirrors. Let's say this so we won't be rioted in.
Yes.
Let's say this so they won't tweet it out. Let's say this so that we can continue to, we gotta get through it. I've seen these letters, I've seen these emails, these internal documents that say these things. I'm not making it up. It's real. And it may not come from any of you, because you never know who you sit next to at work. You don't. You know how they show up. You know what they say to you at lunch. But some of you guys don't even know that some of your friends are the problems within your organizations. And I challenge you to check them on it. You don't have to be mean about it, but you have to be courageous enough to start having these conversations with some of your colleagues that you know are the roadblocks. Else, we're gonna be here talking about the same thing 20 years from now.